services for recessing for us. They had 8 panels and they were still on panel 1. Woo! So I say thank you, Councilwoman Bass, thank you, Councilwoman Sanchez, because you sure didn't have to. He who holds the mic has the power to run their committee as they see fit, and they were very, very kind to do this. So the Committee on Education is now called into order. We will ask the clerk to read the title of resolution before she reads it. We note that we do have a quorum. Certainly, we thank Councilwoman Sherelle Parker, Councilwoman Helen Gem, Councilwoman Maria Canoni Sanchez, and certainly yours truly. We're here, so we have a quorum, and we will begin. Will the clerk read the title of the resolution?
Resolution 17-1018. Resolution authorizing the City Council Committee on Education to hold hearings to discuss how we can better implement educational standards in the early childhood years from pre-K to 3rd grades to prepare our children for success later in life.
Thank you very much. We're going to begin right away since so many people have limited time. We will call on panel 1, Dr. William Height. We thank him for being here, our school district superintendent. Cheryl Logan, School District of Philadelphia Chief Academic Support Officer. Diane Castelbuono, School District Deputy Chief of Early Learning. Elena Radiff, Martha Washington School Principal, that's my area too. And Kimberly Ellaby, Samuel Powell School, my principal as well. Thank you. That will be our first panel, and we'll try to move quickly. We don't want to hold people up, and hopefully we can have a good discussion on this issue. Dr. Height?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I am joined by the members that you just introduced, so in order to save time, I will not reintroduce them, but I do want to thank our 2 principals who are here. It is Elena Ratliff from Martha Washington, she's right here to my right, and Kim Ellaby from Samuel Powell. Kim is on the left, and so I want to thank them, and in joining Cheryl Logan, Dr. Cheryl Logan, and Diane Castelbuono and myself on this panel. So when I arrived at the district, we set goals, and these were ambitious but imperative goals. And I want, before I begin or continue, want to also say hello to the other members of the Education Committee who are also present. So thank you all for being present as well. We sought better academic outcomes and structural stability within broader aspirations for greater equity and opportunity for our students. We developed a strategic plan with 4 anchor goals critical to our long-term success and to the children of the city. And one of those principal initiatives was to see 100% of 8-year-olds reading on grade level. Why did early literacy play such a large role amongst our many needs? Because we know that on-track literacy is an important indicator of a child's future, academic and professional success. And we know 4th grade reading is the turning point. If a child is reading on level by 4th grade, we see lower rates of dropping out, risky behavior, and incarceration later in life. We see greater percentages of students graduating from high school, greater percentages of students attending, and fewer students being identified with special educational needs. Tackling a district-wide initiative like this in an urban setting with limited resources required a strategic and comprehensive plan that brought together educators, families, administrators, community partners, and private funders. 4 years ago, we went to work. Through a multifaceted and coordinated effort with the city's Read by 4th campaign, and I know Jannie Begoni is here, I saw her earlier. Jannie, thank you for being here as well. Expansion of a citywide pre-K under Mayor Jim Kenney, the generous donations of such crucial foundations, including the William Penn Foundation, the Linfest Foundation, and hundreds of other private and individual donors across the nation who have come together to make early literacy the top priority here in Philadelphia. The result was a systemic and highly individualized training and support system for our K-3 teachers and students, updated instructional materials, modernized classrooms, and the involvement of parents and families to provide a truly holistic support system for all of our students. We begin this effort with our dedicated teachers. Over the past 3 years, we have worked to ensure that every K-3 teacher in our district receive professional development and evidence-based literacy practices, supported by full-time school-based coaches who provide hands-on individualized feedback and job-embedded coaching to teachers about classroom practices. Our partner, Read by 4, is supporting these efforts by working directly with local colleges and universities to ensure that new teachers receive the training they need in evidence-based literacy practices during the certification process. That way, the district can hire new teachers who are already trained in the science of reading and instruction, particularly at the early grades. We launched and successfully completed a 3-year multi-million-dollar funding campaign to equip every K-3 classroom with a leveled library providing over 1 million Just Right books to support 46,000 students under our Right Books campaign. And last year, we remodeled 70 classrooms in 8 of our lowest performing schools in terms of literacy. Next year, we will expand this program to even more schools and even more classrooms. These classrooms have activity centers and seating designed to support small group instruction, as well as improved lighting, new paint, new cabinets, and new technology and manipulatives. By improving the physical spaces our children learn in, we can help them develop early academic and cognitive skills. We know none of this matters if students aren't in school, so we have renewed our focus on improving school attendance across the district. And we've expanded breakfast service at our schools to ensure more students are in school on time and ready to learn. We also focus on parent and guardian engagement so families can help support early literacy development at home. Our work and our investments are paying off. We're quickly seeing proof that this type of systemic approach can yield measurable results. Last year, only our second full year of the initiative, the percentage of third graders in the district reading on level increased by 5 points, surpassing statewide gains. As the superintendent of the district, I'm fortunate to be able to see the results firsthand in the joy that reading brings to our students and the enthusiasm it generates for more learning. We're reinvigorating the sparks of creativity and imagination that are at the heart of early literacy. And this is just the beginning. We look to the next few years with anticipation, having created a synergistic system in which more of the right resources are focused on reading, and teachers with specialized training can hone their skills and apply them more effectively. It is also not enough. We have a long ways to go. We know certain schools are improving faster than others, and with urban literacy rates still under 40%, we know there is much to be done. But our initial work and progress prove that change is possible and growth is achievable. Supporting our educators with resources, capacity, skills, and the knowledge they need will be critical to continuing to move our students forward. It is imperative that we do this and maintain these supports. These students are the future citizens of our city and our world, and creating strong readers will help ensure their potential is limitless. Madam Chair, I'd like to thank you for your commitment to education in Philadelphia, and I look forward to continuing to work with you and the members of your committee to improve educational outcomes for all children throughout the city.
Thank you very much. I note you mentioned here that with urban literacy rates still under 40%. Why do we think that is true? Do we have enough teachers? Do we have enough books? Do we have the materials? I see we're fixing up our classrooms. What do we, and I'm glad we improved 5%. What is it that, that we need to do? And remember, we're hopeful that with council okaying whoever the mayor chooses to be on the board, that we can ask them questions more easily than before.
Sure. Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. And I mean, one of the things that we need to do is remain focused on the work that we've already begun. And that work is multifaceted in that we, number one, had to train individuals on how to teach reading, particularly in the early grades, K through 3. We had to direct resources to schools that were the most in need of those resources, and we did that first. We did that first with classroom materials, with reading coaches. We did it first with redoing all of the literacy classrooms. Now our focus has really become or has turned to the practices that are happening in classrooms and making sure that we are seeing those practices with fidelity on a day-to-day basis across all of our schools. We are pleased to say that we're moving quickly from 1 out of every 3 children reading on grade level to increasing that. But I think it's with the continued efforts that we've begun and maintaining those efforts and staying focused on that work would be the best way to continue to see the progress that we are seeing in those places. I would also add that it's also important that the teachers that we've trained, particularly in the K-3 classrooms, that we make sure that they remain in the K-3 classrooms so that those individuals are not trained and then they move to 8th grade or 5th grade, but then they stay in those classrooms as well. And then as we begin to see those children improve and then move through the system, we would see then the reading outcomes increase as well. And one thing that I didn't add in my comments is one of the things that I'm most proud of is that we've had more children move from the lowest category to the next category. They're still not proficient because they were at below basic, but we've seen thousands of children move from below basic to basic, and we know that that move has to take place before those children get to proficient. And so that's a product of the tremendous work that our leaders and our principals are doing and our support staffs are doing in schools each and every day.
So these are issues and ways and programs that you have now that you want to continue and you think you can move it along more quickly?
Yes. No, we think that, well, I don't want to give a false sense or be unrealistic. Teaching, because of where we are and because of where we've historically been, at least in the school district, that we know that this effort is going to improve over time if in fact we maintain our focus. And so it's not going to improve overnight, but it will improve over time. And because we're seeing the children move, the largest number of children move from the lowest level to the next level, then we see that the trend is moving in the positive direction. And so my point to you and to the members of the committee is that it's really important for us to stay focused on these efforts that we have started, particularly in the K-3 space, and then begin to think about how do we now use reading for 4 through 8 or 4 through high school so that children are actually learning from what they are now able to read. And that's one thing that's our next big tranche of work, but the work that we're going to do to improve the literacy skills is really happening at kindergarten through 3rd grade.
I'm telling you, teaching cursive writing with help. I know every year. And let me say to my pal school principal that the parking authority has said they're going to work out our issue. I met with them as recently as last week.
That's good.
So I'm hoping that our issue, Dr. Height, won't take too many years. All right, let me share the mic. Councilwoman Maria Sanchez.
Thank you, Dr. Height, and thank you, all of you, for your commitment, particularly to early education. Since we don't have universal pre-K or universal kindergarten, what are we doing to ensure continuum so that the child is not in a service provider, age 3 and 4, and then loses a year? How are we doing this, and how are we making sure?
Good afternoon. My name is Diane Bowen. I'm the Deputy for Early Learning, and one of the important components of the third grade reading effort that we have is looking at the pre-K through third grade continuum, and to make sure that we identify children who are struggling in literacy and language development as early as possible, before they fall further and further behind. So we've looked very closely at the standards and aligning the pre-K standards with the K-3 standards. We have a better screening mechanism now for identifying when a student is struggling, the specific components they're struggling in. We track components of literacy development like letter naming fluency and phonemic segmentation, so that we can address those long before students are taking the third grade reading test. And a big part of this is actually paying attention to the standards in Pennsylvania. So Pennsylvania has done a really good job of laying out the standards from pre-K through grade 3 in language and literacy. And so we are working very closely with the providers, pre-K providers in the community around making sure that they understand those standards. But as you said, we are not yet at universal pre-K.
So what happens, what are we doing early enough when a child is at a center? When are we engaging parents for that connectivity that seems to be missing? This is the biggest complaint, I get, and people ask me. So what are we doing for that connectivity so that if a parent was aggressive enough to get their child into a quality pre-K, what are we doing to help them connect their child to kindergarten and so that we don't have those gaps?
Cheryl Logan, Chief Academic Officer. I am, the team is doing many things. So we're working with our Office of Family and Community Engagement to make sure first that parents know when kindergarten registration is, and that parents can start registering students for kindergarten. Actually, several weeks ago that registration began, and then also working with our pre-K providers. We're also looking and monitoring our kindergarten enrollment, because one of the things that we know that is if we can keep our students close to home, that they are more likely to attend. So if we need to add a class at a particular school, that the earlier that we know, and that kind of goes back to parents knowing early and then understanding the benefits of early registration. So the benefits, once parents realize their children are going to be in kindergarten for the following year, there's an effect of that you can measure between how early they register and how well they do in kindergarten, because once they know, they start doing all the things that they know they need to prepare them to be sitting in the seat. But I think that that is the most powerful thing that we are doing, making sure that students can stay as close to home, that we open up additional classrooms in areas where the need is as close as to where students would be their neighborhood school, so they don't have to transition from K to 1 to a different school, because we do notice that some parents choose not to if it's not going to be their neighborhood school. And the third thing that we're working with is that we have about almost 2,000 students that come from early intervention, and we are working more closely with our early intervention providers to, one, make sure that parents are aware that they can start as soon as they know their child is going to be attending kindergarten and the child is age eligible, they can start registering them. They don't need to wait to have IEP meetings or anything like that. They can go right ahead and register their child. There was a lot of I wouldn't call it misinformation, but confusion about when parents could register if their children were coming from early intervention. And then working with the early intervention providers about what the expectations are for kindergarten, as well as our home daycare providers, to align what they are doing in their homes or in the more formal pre-K settings, so students are ready to transition successfully.
So some of the criticism we had around some of the pre-K, how the slots evolved, right? Because 30% of the slots are going to folks who could afford to pay, but they have a slot that they don't pay. Do you think the system is equitable in its current distribution of slots? And if there are gaps, are you identifying them so as the city rolls out its next batch of slots, that they are available in those places where there are gaps to reach that goal of yours, which is to try to keep people home, as close to home as possible?
So we are working very closely with the city on, we do regular community needs assessment that not only measure the dearth of adequate pre-K slots, but also talk about family need. I think the challenge sometimes we have is that sometimes there's not a provider in the neighborhood where we actually have a need. And so one of the big efforts that the city is taking the lead on is also growing the quality of new providers. So that is also integral to that effort. But at this time, yes, we are working very closely to make sure that we as closely match need and demand, but it is almost hard to do perfectly, but yes.
Yeah, and we'll ask you as we get closer to the budget hearings a little bit of that, right? Because my frustration was that we did a lot of funding to the top, 3 and 4, when I felt most of my money should have gone to 1 and 2s, right? So that we grow the system. And unfortunately, because of the litigation, the training money and the commitment to that training and growing of those service providers has not happened. So we'll be interested in seeing how much of, as the slots roll out, how much of those are going to go to building those quality and those gaps. But it would be good for you if the school district can provide to us particular neighborhoods at a citywide level where there are some serious gaps, so that we are aware, so we make sure that that happens.
We can certainly do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, very important. Chair also notes that Councilman David O. was in attendance, and we thank him. Councilwoman Gem.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And, I just want to open this by thanking Dr. Height for his deep commitment and your team to your deep commitment to early childhood education. I think the city made, with the administration really made a huge investment around pre-K expansion, but I think that the district has really worked to try to match that with a real investment on that transition piece. It's great to have Ms. Casabono in the district to, see over that transition. I want to thank Dr. Height for his commitment to the school breakfast program and to feeding programs that are supportive, and as well to your investment around ESL and our new students who are learning English, because that, of course, will have a huge impact on the district's literacy rates. As we talk about standards for young people to measure their literacy and, how well they're doing, the matching side is how well we're doing on the opportunity to learn standards. And among those things that I've heard a lot of concerns about from our teachers and from school-based personnel has been about class size. As you know, kindergarten, first and second grade is 30 students per class. There is no guarantee for, any additional personnel. And I know that when I've had teacher town halls or met with parents, a lot of parents want to talk about the need for their children to have a much more personalized learning experience. The city's looking at making a potentially massive investment in our schools. Is class size one of the things that you've taken a look at? And I want to be thoughtful about how I say this, because I think, it doesn't have to be a full-time teacher in a classroom going down, but I think what I'm hearing most from a lot of teachers and school personnel is they need someone in the classroom who could even be there for part-time that will have a literacy focus for the young people to relieve the, 30 per teacher, and that's just, our standard. It's not even if we get more overcrowded than that, and I believe we have a number of incidences. So could you talk a little bit about how classroom assistance or literacy assistance in the classroom, even for part of the time, could play into supporting some of your literacy standards, and also be a measure of a school's a measure of the district's commitment towards helping students meet that?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Councilwoman. And we are looking at supporting the class. We're looking at the class size issue, and we started this particularly in some of our lowest performing schools, and we looked at reducing the size of the K through second grade classrooms, I believe, in all of our schools that fall into the turnaround network, and we were looking at that as a palette. As you indicated, there are several issues associated with the class size conversation. We have some schools, like one is Powell, that if in fact we wanted to create twice the number of classes in that school, and I'll let the principals talk about how they're doing it in their respective schools, but I'm using Powell just as an example. That, because we have several schools like that. I was at a school the other day with, I was at a school the other day with significant numbers of children in classrooms, and I said, we need to get you another teacher. And the principal said, well, I was offered another teacher. I chose not to take it. Instead, I took a classroom assistant because even with another teacher, I have no place to put another classroom. And we have to take that into consideration in terms of the facilities in some of our areas that are now at capacity. But we've been looking at how do we then utilize the assistance of individuals who are coaching teachers and who are in reading specialists and other classroom assistants, particularly in the early grades, to address some of those issues. And I'll let the two principals talk about how they do this specifically at their schools, and it may give us an indication of how we could think about it from a district perspective. But we are looking at that as a potential investment as we move toward the new budget.
So, good morning again, or good afternoon.
Thank you for your great work.
Thank you.
Hillary, thank you.
Thank you. So, PAL is one of the schools that Dr. Height referred to that is actually at capacity. And so, increasing the number of teachers would not allow us to reduce class size in the traditional sense. So there are no additional classes to be able to set up to split those classes up to create smaller sizes. What we have done in lieu of that is really look at ways to utilize staff and personnel to still create a lower adult to student ratio. So for example, in some of my classes, we utilize a co-teach model where I have paired a regular education and a special education teacher together in the classroom to essentially create a ratio of 1 to about 13 or 14. In other classes, I utilize the support of our classroom assistants to reduce class size. And then one of the things that we do to ensure that they're prepared to provide quality instruction to students, our classroom assistants actually sit in on grade group meetings with the teachers that they're supporting. They sit in and participate in professional development. They work closely with our literacy lead teachers in all trainings around literacy practices. So that enables them to really hone their skills as well, and also enables them to really bring some quality to what they're doing in the classroom with students.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I represent Martha Washington. I'm the principal there. And with my school, we were actually fortunate to have small class sizes. Right now for kindergarten and second grade, our student capacity maxes out at roughly 20 students. And at first grade, there's slightly more. And similar to what Principal Ellerby just stated, we do utilize assistants in our first grade classroom just to provide and try to cut down on the student to teacher ratio. We have found that to be extremely successful. And even with them being in the classroom, they also participate in some of our professional development activities. So when we're talking about guided reading, when we're talking about phonics, they're in there with them to learn and to be in the trenches right there to be able to take that back to their students. And we actually have seen growth in that area. Similar to what Dr. Height was stating earlier, our literacy scores last year went from 52% up to 62%, which is more gain than that we have seen probably in the last 5 years, just from some of the work that the district has been doing around literacy.
Mm-hmm. And do you attribute any of that to the size of the attention that students feel like they may receive in the classroom?
Definitely the size, but also the training that they're getting as well.
And Principal Ratliff, I'm sorry that I'm not clear. Are you a turnaround school, a turnaround network school?
I'm not a
And
turnaround school.
Then do you feel without totally putting you on the spot, but do you feel like the smaller class size is like rewarded by the district? So to some extent, like, you know, many, in the ways that staff and resources can be distributed by the number of students or the population of students in a building. One of the questions we've been asking is whether like schools that actually have a lower class size in the K-2 framework could actually like not have that be a punitive kind of situation. So sometimes it like rubs up against like the district's issues around capacity, and of course we have a funding issue, and so I'm not excusing any of that, but what I guess I'm curious about, and maybe Dr. Haidt, maybe you can weigh in a little bit, but some of the struggle has been like, if we do get lower class sizes in K-2, sometimes some schools have felt like a teacher might get taken, or that, you know, in the past, something that you helped us address with, there might be a split grade. And so I'm wondering, is the district starting to shift that a little bit so that if you do see a classroom of between 20 to 25, we will actually sort of just, you know, if it's K-2, we're just sort of gonna back off and let that be. And that's in part something where, you know, we rub up against this commitment and wanting to talk about class size, but are we able to do that in the schools where this happens?
Well, it depends on the reason that the class size is that, because we have, our schools all receive title funding, and some buy teachers to reduce class size. So I'm not sure about Dr. Ratliff's school, but you know, that is it, and a teacher would not be taken in that because they purchased the teacher to reduce class size, and they have the money in the budget to support that. And then the second piece of that is in terms of when we have leveling, because I think that's what I hear leveling in your question. We have to make very difficult decisions at leveling because the issue at leveling is that there are children in classes in other schools where the class size is too large, and we need to have the teacher. So we either have to hire teachers, which requires additional resources. So we typically have sometimes we have to add teachers, but often it's an even trade. We have to reduce as many teachers as we need to add in other schools. So it's very context dependent and depends. I don't feel that schools are penalized for having a class size. I do feel we have a very broad discussion about how we look at it as a district. And we do, and there is a lot of deference made for special circumstances when the leveling conversation happens. So there are schools that end up keeping a teacher, and there are some schools that end up losing a teacher. But because of the way schools also have a lot of autonomy around their title funding, they choose to either reduce class size or do other things, or to release a teacher. We have many, you know that many schools have teachers that are released, and for good reasons. And that's a choice that the school is making, because that release of that teacher typically means that the students will have to be with other teachers, which will increase the class size. So again, very context dependent. And I think that it's great that at Martha Washington they've had those remarkable results, and I appreciate the principal attributing it to multiple factors.
Councilwoman, I'll just add, the final point on this is, so we are less punitive in terms of the schools that are able to make this work in a different way. And whether they're using Title I, or because we trained all of the teachers in the K-3 space, we held harmless this year at leveling those schools that were going to lose teachers at the K-3 space, if in fact they were going to lose one or fewer. So we're less punitive, but it does boil down to resources. Yeah. And because we made, as a part of our investment, trying to address the consequences associated with leveling, we were able to do that this year, and looking to do that as we move forward. But as Dr. Ratliff and Principal Powell and Principal Ellaby have stated, I think it's important that we give schools maximum flexibility on how to utilize the funds that they receive, particularly the restricted funds like Title I. And if they can use that fund to reduce the classes, we don't allow that to impact anything else in terms of what's happening in their schools.
Thank you. First, I would be remiss if not thanking Dr. Height for the commitment to the hold harmless positions at the K-3. I know that it gets a little complicated as the positions switch around and seniority kind of can bump people, but I really do appreciate that, and I think that that's an enormous commitment. I also would be remiss if I didn't congratulate you, Dr. Logan, on your appointment to be the new superintendent in Omaha, Nebraska. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So thank you for that. I do want to go on record, however, as saying that I am drastically opposed to leveling. And I think like all of us in this room understand that. For those people who do not know what leveling is, I think Dr. Logan also alluded to it, is sometime mid-year we're not able to distribute the number of teachers as needed, and so we'll see enormously overcrowded classrooms come, the start of school or October, November, and then sometime in October, November, because we can't hire additional teachers, it's not a great time to hire additional teachers at that time either. We have to pull from other schools, and it just creates enormous disruption, and I know all of us in this room share that belief that, we shouldn't start school for these young people with their permanent teacher sometime in October, November. We really want school to start September 4th, 5th, or 6th. Whenever that first day of school starts, that's when the school year kicks off and they're with their teacher. That's a commitment I want to bring to the school district of Philadelphia. I would like to see an end to leveling, especially if it's resource-based. And I'd love for us to continue the conversation. I had one other very quick question, Dr. Height, which is a lot about truancy in our lower grades in particular. And, we used to have a commitment around homeschool liaisons. These were individuals who would, it's different from a secretary, but basically, if a student does not show up for the day, the homeschool liaison would come in, pick up the phone, call the parents, figure out what's going on, report back into the school, and then start working with the family. Right now, because of our new DHS reporting requirements, we have a number of families, including families who are referred to placement, in which the broad category is truancy. There are other issues that are potentially going along with that. We just haven't figured it out. But I wanted to ask if you could talk a little bit more about whether there's been some reflections and either ideas for new positions, resources, things that you want us as a council to be thinking about, if there's an opportunity for investment to specifically address some of the things so that we can get our young people on track, make sure that they're attending school in kindergarten, first and second grade. It's wonderful to go and hear attendance heroes and all those kinds of things, but that starts early, and it's hard to replicate and we need to intervene when families are in distress as well, so.
Yeah, thank you, and the response to that is also multifaceted, and yourself, breakfast being one of those things that we've used now to ensure that children are in school and that they're ready to learn. But what we've done both as a division and as practice in around schools, as I indicated earlier, we can make all of these investments, and if we can't get children to school, then those investments are moot. And so part of what we've really been focusing on is making sure we have the systems, the processes, and structures in order to give us as much information as we can possibly receive about children attending school and those who are not attending school. And we have, in the Office of Family and Community Engagement, we do have outreach coordinators that still go out and deal with or try to support families. Schools make contact as well with the families, and the whole point is around ensuring that the individual feels welcome, number one, and that we appreciate, number two, when they're there and when their children are there. And number three, understanding the importance of getting their children to school every day. Mm-hmm. And in the past, we've said, well, I said we, I'm generalizing, but we as an institution have said, get to school or else bad things will happen. And I think what we're trying to do is flip that around to, we're glad you're here. Now that you've been here the first 3 weeks, how do we ensure that you stay here the 4th week? And then just try to build that behavior, if you will, to get students to school every day. But we're tracking now differently in terms of who is at school, and we use 95% of the time, so it's actually a number of days each month that children are in school. And then we are also able to identify the families that need the most support in terms of getting children to school and the resources that they then communicate to us that they need in order to be more successful in getting the children to school on time.
Just a point of clarification. How many, are the outreach coordinators distributed regionally by, and how many of them actually serve do we have?
Yeah, I believe they're by networks, and so I don't...
Is it one per network? Or?
I think it's one, well, it depends on how large the problem is. It could be several in some of the networks and then fewer in others. And so I'll have to get that information to you, but I believe it's by the networks, and they are, the coordinators, the outreach coordinators are from the Student Services Division, but they are assigned to the networks.
Yeah. That would be helpful, and again, I don't expect us to solve it. I think it's just another point to put on the discussion list. In general, I've often found that when we have school-based problems or school-based situations with young people, we do sometimes need a point person at that school to directly address it. It's hard when everything lands on, we all know the principal is ultimately responsible, but sometimes if there are specific areas that we're trying to address, and I need to do a little bit more research on the truancy issue for younger grades, but on those things, sometimes we found that you do need a specific person at a school to directly address with those students and that student population, and that's generally when we've seen a significant amount of movement going. It doesn't mean that the district is not committing by the regional or outreach coordinators distributed by network, but it's hard to, as you know, not have that direct contact, a point of responsibility directly at that school. So.
And Councilwoman, if I may add, you just reminded me of something else. We've also begun work with the city under the managing director's office with the out of school time and how we place and where we place those out of school time supports now are also defined by attendance, defined by curfew violations, defined by data that we both have that we can then, where we're able to both direct all of the resources among the city-based services and the school district to those areas. And so we started that work as well, but that's also to address the issue that you just described.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. We are now going to ask you, the next panel is only speaking for 2 minutes. They'll speak 2 minutes, 3 at the most. Would you listen, because this issue, if it doesn't come up today, the issue of charter schools will during budget. Could you give us another few minutes to listen to panel 2, Nia Blackwell at Prima Charter School CEO, David Hardy, Boys Latin Charter School CEO, and Mike Imborgia, Excellent School Director, Research, Data, and Analytics. We thank you all for coming, and I appreciate your time, Dr. Height and panel. This is one of the people coming up that we wrote a letter for. We didn't for everybody, and we have people who run community relations at Penn, at University of Sciences we wrote a letter for, and another charter school. But David Hardy is a person we really been fighting hard for, Mr. Mayor downstairs. So we hope that you are listening, and maybe you will see and understand why. Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for coming. I don't know who's going first.
I will.
Naya.
Thank you.
So you all know her name's Blackwell, so that makes her special to me. And she was the apple of her grandfather's eye. The issue was, who did he love most? His wife or his oldest granddaughter? So
Well,
I'm
sure it was you.
And she was the lawyer for Street, ultimately the lawyer for the Street as mayor, then the police commissioner, and then she did the law cases for the police who got off. And then I think it was because of her grandfather, when he passed away, she thought she had enough of politics. So we have to live without her, but we're grateful they're all here. Thank you.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Chairperson, and to the other members of the Education Committee. Again, I'm Naya Blackwell, and I thank you for extending the opportunity to address you on this most important matter today. I am the Chief Executive Officer of the Prima Charter School. We are a K-8 educational program with campuses in the Overbrook and Frankfurt sections of Philadelphia. But I come here today to speak for a much broader constituency than the Prima community. With me are two gentlemen from the Excellent Schools PA, an advocacy group who focus primarily on school data. They are Michael Imbergia, who serves as the Director of Research, Data, and Analytics, and Mr. David Hardy, who serves as Senior Advisor. Our comments this afternoon will address the clearly distinguishable groups of students who comprise the lion's share of those underperforming academically. And so, as the resolution so accurately states, providing a proper education for every child is a complex issue without a simple solution. I think we can all agree with that sentiment. We will also agree on the factors that we've long heard as being barriers to academic achievement, like class size, technology, school climate, parent involvement, and funding. These were the issues years ago, and they persist. But as we discuss standards today, it cannot be overstated that it isn't just standards. We have those in place. But it's providing access to quality programs and the lack of that opportunity that prevents us from making the strides in education that we are so eager to achieve. So, to your question in the resolution, why are the outcomes from school to school so drastically different? And how are some schools able to implement educational standards with success while others are not? Well, we can look back at the barriers I previously stated as an indicator. Quality programs have many of the tools they need to create an environment where young children can learn from the very moment they walk into the school. Other schools don't have a fraction of what they need, yet we are all held to the same standard and are not giving any consideration when a standard isn't met. And what do I mean? We all take the same assessment exam. It should also be noted that the test itself must be considered if we are to use it to evaluate whether or not our children are learning. If the students' reading and math levels seem low based upon the test scores, it is important to consider that the tests themselves may have unreasonable expectations of what students should be able to achieve at various ages. For example, one might want to investigate who creates the test and the instructions, actually. What are their qualifications? How many years have they taught students at the ages for which they're developing the test? In a recent discussion with a teacher at my school concerning the success or challenges students face while taking the assessments, she shared an experience from last year, and her name is Suzanne DeSeff. She's at Prima Charter School. When I was proctoring the PSSAs for third grade, I noticed that the rules for teachers have changed in at least one important way since some years ago. Teachers are no longer allowed to assist students in understanding what the instructions themselves are asking. Students are expected to be able to read and comprehend those instructions. And I also noticed that the reading level for many of the terms used in the PSSA instructions for third grade students was above what should be expected of third graders. I was dismayed when a third grader asked me to explain to her what the instructions were asking her to do, and in response I had to tell her that I was not allowed to help her read the instructions. So this is an example of how some students may start out at a deficit. Their confidence may be shaken at the very beginning of the exam, which in most cases hinders their result. It should also be noted that I was speaking of an Prima student, and the third grade students at Prima significantly outperformed the average reading assessment score last year citywide. So we believe that we are one of those schools with a quality program. However, we too recognize the need for a serious examination of all of the variables involved in this debate. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good afternoon, council members. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss the state of education in Philadelphia. All right, thank you. My name is Michael Imberge, and I am Director of Research, Data, and Analytics at Excellent Schools PA, a statewide education advocacy organization. We at Excellent Schools PA believe that a child's race, family income, or zip code should never dictate their access to a high-quality education. It was through that lens that we analyzed available PSSA and school progress report data to provide a summary for you today. As you know, the School District of Philadelphia divides its schools into learning networks, which are largely based on geography, but exclude schools within the autonomy, innovation, and turnaround networks. In addition to breaking down data at the network level, we will also provide an overview of brick-and-mortar charter schools, which are part of Philadelphia's public school landscape but operate independently of the district. Currently, nearly 70,000 students attend a Philadelphia charter school. First, we broke the data down by learning network, where there are vast disparities among the schools based on their location throughout the city. For example, on average, only 18% of third graders in the schools within Network 4, which is mainly North Philadelphia, were proficient or advanced on the English Language Arts PSSA. Network 4 is also home to a majority of the schools within a turnaround network, where student outcomes are behind the district, with 21% of third graders proficient or advanced. Network 7, which is made up of Olney, Mount Airy, and parts of Germantown, is also well below the district average, with 26% of the network's third graders able to demonstrate grade level skills on the English Language Arts PSSA. It is important to note that both Network 4 and 7 schools have high populations of minority students. In fact, 93% of Network 4 and 84% of Network 7 students are either African American or Hispanic. In comparison, Network 8, the Greater Northeast schools, have a minority population of 41%, and 54% of their third graders are scoring proficient or advanced on the English Language Arts PSSA. With charter school waitlists often in the hundreds and sometimes thousands, parents in low-performing networks have very few options to find schools that will meet the needs of their children. We also wanted to look at the larger comparison of SDP schools in the charter sector. The most recent English Language Arts PSSA data showed that on average, charter schools in Philadelphia outperformed SDP schools by 15 percentage points. In 2017, 50% of third graders who attended charter school scored proficient or advanced on the English Language Arts PSSA, compared to 35% of School District of Philadelphia third graders. Within SDP, there are 2 schools in the autonomy network that reported PSSA scores for third grade English Language Arts. In those schools, nearly 52% of third graders scored proficient or advanced. Higher achievement rates at Philadelphia charter schools can be attributed to many factors. One of those is flexibility and the emphasis on individualized learning plans. Many schools in the charter sector and autonomy network have the flexibility to assess students throughout the school year, particularly in the beginning of the year, to evaluate and make timely decisions regarding curriculum and supports that may be needed to ensure student success. Another key metric in examining the quality of an elementary school is the percentage of students who are reading on grade level in kindergarten through 2nd grade. Grade level reading in grades K to 2 is measured using different assessments for SDP and charter schools. Currently, this data is available in the school district school progress report, and a vital piece of information for parents as they prepare to send their students to school for the first time. There's not as wide a disparity in achievement scores among school governance on this metric. In charter schools, 56% of students in kindergarten through 2nd grade are reading on level, compared to 47% in the district. The charter sector seems better equipped to maintain achievement through grade 3, losing about 5 percentage points, where the district drops 12 percentage points from K to 2 proficiency to grade 3 PSSA proficiency. Again, Network 4 is well below the district average, with only 35% of students in kindergarten through 2nd grade able to demonstrate grade level reading skills. Some areas showing improvement are Networks 1 and 2, made up of South and West Philadelphia. Both networks are at or below the district average on 3rd grade English Language Arts PSSA, but have nearly 50% of their K to 2 students reading on grade level. While student achievement needs to be increased across the city, it is important to identify the strides that have been taken to make early learning and literacy a priority. The Read by 4 movement has clearly influenced the improvements that we have seen in early literacy gains, and we encourage continued support of that initiative. If the City Council and Mayor is truly committed to ensuring Philadelphia's youngest students are receiving a great education, we encourage the support and protection of the city's high-quality charter schools. As the data I just presented clearly show, On average, brick-and-mortar charter schools in Philadelphia are providing a high-quality education to students in their early school career. We ask that as governance of the school district shifts back to the hands of our locally elected officials, you provide families and students with greater access to high-quality school options. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burgess.
Good afternoon. My name is David Hardy, and for the record, I work for Excellent Schools PA. I retired from Boys Latin. So, we have come here today in full support of Council's efforts to determine how we might better implement the educational standards for those students who are just beginning their educational experiences. Council has rightly recognized that the performance of our city's students is lower than the average of the state. We also hope you will recognize that the academic failure in our schools is often concentrated geographically and racially. When disaggregated, the performance of our students paints a disturbing picture of a system that does not offer educational opportunity equally. Adherence to standards is an essential element of a viable educational experience, but our duty must go beyond just acknowledging those standards. We must ensure that the academic preparation academic preparation to reach those standards is available to all children, no matter where they live or what they look like. The issue of equity is evident throughout the K-12 spectrum of public education in Philadelphia. It is a result of many factors. Children come with a wide range of levels of preparedness. It is important to meet each child at that point. But the meeting point should not determine where we ultimately expect the student, what we ultimately expect of the student. Here is where the value of standards is sometimes misinterpreted. When standards are used as a destination and not a milestone, they can limit what we believe the student is capable of achieving. This is where students who may come from difficult circumstances can be dispatched from meaningful educational opportunities. In our city, that will likely mean low-income, black or brown children. We talk about these children in terms of their problems and are less likely to consider their potential. It is an educational pigeonhole. We have developed a system of public schools that is broad, diverse, and robust. It is time for us to demand that they produce the results our city needs. When the schools do not produce for the communities they serve, we cannot sit by idly. If we evaluate on a systematic level, we will not appreciate the depth of the situation. We need school-level evaluations with a longitudinal component. We need to know how children are doing in a school today and how they did when they moved to the next level. These performance measurements must be available to parents making decisions for their school decisions for their children. If we do not take these steps to ensure that there is equity in our public schools, if we do not take the steps to ensure that there is equity in our public schools, and that means equal opportunity for a positive outcome, we will have relegated large numbers of children to dreadful futures. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me ask, what do you think we as elected officials or some other advocates or principals should do to try to get, I heard Condoleezza Rice say on the air last week that there was a time you could be born in poor circumstance or in public housing and you get to apply to a decent school, get in, and you could achieve, and you could be a successful person, achieve any height. But now, she said, people ask, what is your zip code? And that determines what your educational level is like. Do you think that's true?
Yes, I do. And look, you and I know from our experience that you can come from circumstances that aren't great, but you can make something of. You know, if you get the opportunity, and that opportunity for me, and I feel the same way about you, I think I know your story, is that happened in school. Some teacher, a principal, somebody at the school took an interest in you because, I mean, I know for myself, there were no college graduates in my family for me to go to for help, so it had to come from school. I think what happens now is that we really tend to focus on the problems that these kids come to school with. And believe me, there are kids that come to school with some enormous problems. But we can't solve all their problems. We want to, we like to, it'd be great if we could, but we can't. But we can educate them and teach them, give them the skills to solve a lot of their own problems. Biggest problem is being able to support yourself, being able to have a house and raise a family and those types of things. And to do that, you need to be educated. You need skills, marketable skills that are going to allow you to pursue a future. Dr. Height talked about trying to encourage kids to come to school. I think the best way to encourage kids to come to school is to give them a good education. Kids aren't stupid. They know what a good education is. They'll come for that. But what they won't come for is to sit in a room where they're not going to get anything, where people don't care about them. So I think that, yes, if what council can do, council can make sure that we are all, and I don't just mean district schools, I mean charter schools too, hold us accountable. Hold us accountable and make sure that when you have a school in this city, that you know who's coming out of that school, where they're going, what kind of success levels they have, so that the schools that are working can proliferate and the schools that aren't should not proliferate.
And let me ask you another question. There have been in the last several years so many charter schools and some traditional public schools too closing down. And then we have so many parents and community people who come to us and we try to write letters or go to the school district or contact the superintendent and say, why can't these people get a chance? Where will these children go? What happens to these neighborhood schools? What happens to, some of them have brand new buildings, new charter schools and brand new buildings that are closed. Then what? You have a big blight in the neighborhood. The children don't have a school and you end up with a big, beautiful building closed. And I don't know why for that. I mean, I know that the district says they didn't succeed in one way or another, but it just seems that something's wrong with the whole, something's wrong with the whole picture.
I'll take that. There is, and part of it, look, when a school closes, there's probably a reason why that school should close. And I mean, I know I'm familiar with the schools that have closed. I think a lot of them did things to get themselves closed, and that's just the honest assessment of the situation. I think that what really has to happen on a school closure is paying attention to where those kids go next, because by the mere fact that they're in a school that closed, they've been in a place where they haven't gotten a good educational opportunity. So sending them to another place where they don't have an educational opportunity is disastrous. And that's true for the district schools that close too. To close a district school and send them to another school that's failing, you really didn't do anything. School closures, I think that's just part of life. If something, some schools just get too old, they fall apart. Some schools aren't working, you have to close them. Those things happen. But what has to happen is our commitment to making sure that those kids who came out of a bad situation get to a better situation. And before we start talking about closing, we should make sure we have that road map set up for those kids. She's lobbying. And she's right, though. We need to support the schools that don't have spaces, that are at capacity, that could use the space and educate more children effectively. We should be looking at places like that. And she's got a place like that, so I might as well say that on the record.
Thank you, thank you. Any other questions? Thank you very much. I appreciate all of you, and I appreciate our being able to call you like we do all the time
All right.
when we have questions and concerns. Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Panel 3, Donna Cooper, Public Citizens for Children and Youth, Executive Director. Carol Kalimnik, Alliance for Philadelphia Public Schools co-founder. Catherine Blunt, one of my favorite principals as well, former school principal. And Rosewater, National Grade Level Read by Third Senior Consultant. Thank you all. And while they're coming, let me tell you that we have in our packets testimony that's written because the individuals aren't here, but it will be submitted as though they were in attendance. That is testimony from Jerry Jordan, Philadelphia Federation of Teachers President, Representative Dr. James R. Roebuck from the Pennsylvania House of Representatives, and also a former teacher. Barbara Dowdall, Alliance for Philadelphia Public Schools member, and Allison McDowell, consultant. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman, and
Thank you.
first of all, thank you so much for having this hearing, because this is a really, really important topic, so I appreciate it.
Yes.
I'm Donna Cooper, the Executive Director of Public Citizens for Children and Youth, and I wrote really long testimony, so there's no way I'm going to read it all, because you would kill me.
Thank you.
But I guess there are some, there are some things that I would like to just bring to your attention. The first is that I think that this issue around early literacy, as you've already sort of pointed out today, is complicated. That it isn't just about children learning vocabulary, it isn't just about children learning phonics, it's about children learning critical thinking skills, comprehension, creativity, analytical skills. And so one of the things that I heard a couple years ago when we started to sort of do this work was teaching reading is rocket science. And one of the challenges, I think, for a lot of us who became easy readers, I was an easy reader, and I think probably you guys were probably easy readers too. You learned to read relatively easy. And really the challenge for teachers is how do they educate the children who aren't natural readers? Where there are challenges to all that skill building that makes education and literacy possible. So first of all, you all have taken the very first step to changing our early literacy challenge by investing in pre-K. Right? Make no mistake, the place to affect this is in the first 5 years of a kid's life, and by expanding access to high-quality pre-K, you've already augmented and made the job of the school district in the future easier. So I want to make sure everybody in Philadelphia recognizes that. But as you know, learning doesn't stop at pre-K. Learning to read continues through grade 3. We have a model in America. You learn to read until you're in 4th grade, and then you read to learn for the balance of your education. That's sort of the model that we use. If you have my testimony in front of you, however, I'd like you to turn to the page that's not numbered, unfortunately, my apologies, that has a chart like this. So if anybody's looking, there's a chart, and it is on, I had page numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4th page. I apologize for the lack of page numbers. But this chart shows, I'll wait if you have a sec, and that many big pile of testimony. And maybe, Sydney, if you want to take it up to the council members, and then they make it easier. Yeah. We have more copies, so if we just turn to the 4th page on this one, it'll be easier. So this chart kind of speaks to what Larry Jones was just talking about, in fact. Since 1992, this country has made essentially no progress on increasing the share of children who are reading at grade level. Worse yet, when you look at that chart, as Larry points out, that aggregates every kid. African American and Latino kids are doing 20-30% worse than white kids reading at grade level. But across the board, we've not made much progress. It's a pretty depressing chart. Now, if you go to the next page, flip over, you see a more complicated bar chart. But one of the good things about the bar chart is that the bottom green part of the bar is shrinking. And what that says is from 92 till now, we're seeing fewer kids farthest behind. That's below basic. So we're in fact making progress for African American, Latino, and white kids and Asian kids in decreasing the kids that are really, really far behind. That's good. So, but the big challenge is we're getting them to come up a little, but they're really not getting beyond proficiency. So we are making a little bit of progress here as a country, and I say that because I want everybody to understand this is not a Philadelphia-only problem. But what we did find when we launched, when my great colleague Charmaine Latnock-Turner and I launched the grade level reading by fourth campaign in Philadelphia, we found that these disparities at the national level and these trends at the national level are exactly the same in Philly for public and private, public school students, traditional and charter. We don't know how it is for the Archdiocese kids because they don't take the PSSAs, but we obviously have a lot of work to do in front of us. So what the campaign set up to do, and I appreciate that you all know about the grade level reading campaign, Councilwoman Blackwell's been at many of our campaign events, was to basically say that by 2021, we would have as many kids on grade level as the best school district in state, and we pegged that to Lower Merion. They have 88% of their kids reading at grade level by third grade, so we ought to be there too. Now, we get it, they have twice as much money as we do, and they have twice as many kids reading on grade level as we do. That math should not be lost on anyone, right? But in spite of that, we began to work with the district and providers and early childhood programs and parents and community organizations from across the city to create the grade level reading by the Read by Fourth campaign. And Jenny's here, as you know Jenny well. In case that any questions about some of the things that you asked, I wanted to make sure you knew Jenny was here. But I want to say that there are two issues that were raised earlier in this testimony that confound our work. One is the shortage of pre-K slots. Even with the city funds, we're still only at 40% of our kids entering school ready. Fortunately, they're in the highest poverty zip codes, so they're going to make the biggest impact. That's good. We have, on average, we have kids missing 8.5 days in kindergarten. So absenteeism, Councilwoman Gim's question about truancy. If you miss 9 days, based on the national research, which is 5%, you're going to begin to lose your capacity to stay on grade level. And we already at kindergarten are showing 8.5 days absenteeism. Now the grade level reading, the Read by Fourth campaign and the district have a lot going on to boost attendance, and Dr. Height told you some of it. But I will say, anything council members can do through contests and reinforcement to let parents know that every day matters. More than 5%, you're holding your kids back. We hear parents say things like, I thought we got 10 days, because that's when truancy starts, right? So we really have to combat that and boost the attendance rate if we're going to keep these kids going. We have to make sure kids read over the summer. On average, if kids aren't reading over the summer, they're going to lose 2 months of reading gains. There's some startling statistics about the summer reading loss. And again, the campaign is getting books through the rec centers in the summer and the PAL centers and the Boys and Girls Clubs and increasing the degree to which kids are reading over the summer. But the big thing, obviously, that brings us here today is the school district and what are they doing to teach reading. And as you know, the school district has now retrained every teacher in the school district and every elementary school principal. And that is in part possible because Dr. Height led that effort and the William Penn Foundation funded that effort. And we have now got 2,100 teachers who now know how to teach reading. That's great, and they have books in their classroom and they've got coaches, and that's great. But the real reason I was so appreciative that you asked me to come here today is one of the most startling things I learned by going and watching those summer boot camps for teachers. Those teachers said to me, I never knew this before. Nobody ever taught me how to teach reading. Nobody ever taught me how to teach reading. So I encourage us all to begin to have a conversation with our partners in the higher ed sector. Because this bar chart on the fourth page, the line graph, is not going to change unless we radically reform how we train teachers and how we hire teachers. And so the district and the charters are doing the best they can with people who were never trained to teach the basics of literacy to the people who don't learn to read naturally. The 50% of kids who need extra help didn't happen. There was one class maybe, and it might have been on cognitive development, but it really wasn't on the rocket science of teaching reading. And I think when we begin to grapple with that, when we begin to bring our higher eds to the table and challenge them to prepare the teachers for our kids, we're going to see this stuff change much more quickly. And I would welcome any opportunity to work with council on that major overhaul.
Hello, my name is Ann Rosewater.
Thank you. Thank you.
Go, thank you.
Are there questions for Donna, or you want to hear all of us?
Any questions? No, you're fine.
Thank you very much. My name is Ann Rosewater, and I am a senior consultant with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading, the National Campaign for Grade Level Reading, and have spent my career working to promote healthy child development and learning, including as director of a special congressional committee on children, youth, and families, and as a regional director of the Federal Department of Health and Human Services. The National Campaign for Grade Level Reading is a collaborative of foundations, nonprofit partners, business leaders, government agencies, and states and communities across the country, working to ensure that more children in low-income families succeed in school and graduate prepared for college, a career, and active citizenship. Our campaign focuses, as you heard, on an important predictor of school success and high school graduation, grade level reading proficiency by the end of third grade. Our network expands across 360 communities now in 43 states, Washington, D.C., Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands, and includes more than 3,900 local organizations, 450 state and local funders, and 185 United Ways. We want to thank members of the City Council, including and especially Chairperson Blackwell, thank you, and Councilwoman Reynolds Brown, who unfortunately isn't here today, for the opportunity to talk briefly this morning about the work in Philadelphia. Just last year, the campaign recognized Philadelphia as one of 48 campaign pace-setter communities for exemplary progress in building cross-sector collaboration, community-wide mobilization, and public and private funders absolutely committed to increasing the number of kids reading on grade level by the end of third grade. We are quite inspired by the work of the Read by Fourth campaign, led so ably by the Philadelphia Free Library. The campaign's executive director, Jannie, who, as Donna said, is here and has worked so closely with Superintendent Height, Diane Casbuono, Donna Cooper, and many others to unite the school district, the charter and parochial school sectors, the William Penn Foundation, Wells Fargo, Lincoln Financial, and the United Ways of Greater Philadelphia and Southern New Jersey, and many others behind this effort. Philadelphia is in fact a leader in the campaign because you're getting results. It is also one of the leaders in the campaign when it comes to robust partnerships inside and outside of the schools with principals and teachers, as well as summer and out-of-school time programs, parents, and preschool educators. When we look at school district data around the country, we see Philadelphia, one of the largest districts in the campaign overall, on the right track and heading in the right direction. Last year, as you heard, 35% of third graders scored proficient on the PSSA, up from 30% in 2016. That more than 15% increase is greater than what we saw in Dallas and Phoenix last year, and on par with Denver and Raleigh-Durham increases in recent years. These gains are being driven by a variety of factors, speaking to the complex issue of teaching and learning literacy, not the least of which is the unprecedented public-private investment in professional development, which has mobilized an army of literacy coaches, the use of state-of-the-art curricula and assessment tools to reach and lift up the young readers in kindergarten through third grade who are struggling the most. And also, due to the more informal efforts to recruit and deploy reading captains in neighborhoods throughout the city, leveraging small business and the faith community. We are clear-eyed about the problem. There is a reading crisis across the United States. According to the most recent National Assessment of Educational Progress, fully 80% of low-income fourth graders in the country were not reading at grade level. But Philadelphia is lighting up the pathway out of that crisis, and it's a light we hope everyone sees. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Catherine Blunt?
Yes. Hello, my name is Catherine Blunt. I was here last year and I testified before the Education Committee regarding the school district accountability for preparing and matriculating African American male students. And it was interesting to note then, as I suggested, that I felt City Council needed to convene a roundtable of involved stakeholders along with the above mentioned, or because I'm not going by this, so you can't read this to follow me. All right, like Donna. Above mentioned persons like Dr. Clayton, Dr. Lytle, and Dr. Farnbray, as well as retired school district teachers and administrators, to come together with Dr. Height or high-level School District of Philadelphia representatives about improving student education and challenge schools and communities looking to develop specific recommendations for student success in a safe, nurturing school classroom environment. And I concluded at that time, we need to finally take responsibility for growing our own by educating our own students, sending them to colleges, connecting them to careers in education and other fields needed in our city for the future success of our city, and to positively impact our marginalized minority communities as well as our communities in poverty. Children achieving, a phrase coined by Dr. Hornbeck, is a matter of curriculum, instructional delivery in the classroom, professional development of staff, parental engagement in the education of their children, and clean, safe, nurturing educational environments. As a member of the 2015-2016 Philadelphia University Pre-K Commission, Universal Pre-K Commission, I was party to discussions about the number of 3- and 4-year-olds engaged in state-approved Keystone Stars quality pre-K programs. Heard small female and minority-run family daycare providers complain about the STARS program being more interested in checklists than their students learning and growing. Heard parents say they wanted daycare facilities that were affordable, convenient, safe, and culturally inviting. Heard daycare teachers as well as providers complain that kindergarten was not ready for their children. All right? Kindergarten was not ready to receive children who learned to play and played to learn. So when they went to kindergarten, particularly the males were identified as ADD or ADHD because they couldn't sit in those neat little rows all day long, which is an unnatural way for them to transition to learning as a whole. So there were, at that time, identified 4,000, I'll generalize, about 42,000 3- or 4-year-olds residing in Philadelphia, 32 of which were in families living below the poverty line. 15,000 were already in quality pre-K programs, with 10,000 of 17,000 low and moderate income youngsters becoming the targeted population for publicly funded universal pre-K seats and approved city daycare programs. The other 7,000 children may have been in quality child care programs, with the possibility that many were with grandparents or other family members, or even with neighbors, because it was less costly and more convenient for those parents. The universal pre-K program was considered a way to provide quality daycare, early childhood education, and intervention for children at risk because of socioeconomics, including homelessness, English language learning, and/or special education needs. It was hoped that children's needs would be identified and addressed early, thereby enabling them to be more successful and least likely to drop out of school, particularly in the 9th grade, and/or become part of the school-to-prison pipeline. So to monitor and manage Philadelphia's endeavor to provide quality pre-K for our at-risk 3- and 4-year-old population, the city must keep track of their numbers, determine where they are during the day, and push out to those outside of quality pre-K programs and connect them and their parents with quality activities doable with grandmom and other relatives and even the neighbor. Even though children are exposed to pre-K reading and reading activities in even though children are exposed to pre-reading and reading activities in pre-K and kindergarten programs, reading is especially emphasized in 1 through 3rd grades. Children should learn to read and read to learn, as Donna said. This means that teachers, especially those educating children in early years, must know how to teach reading and math and science. So I am going to now quote from Hildebrand Pelzer, who is the son of educators who were educated in Philadelphia, and he is a elementary education teacher, Philadelphia education principal. Several years ago, when I was a principal of the Philadelphia Public School inside the city's prison system, I witnessed a sad truth that I've seen play out repeatedly throughout my tenure as an educator. I found that on average, incarcerated school-age youth, medium age 16, were reading below the 6th grade level. Not having learned to read was the single greatest weakness among these youth, who struggled with pronunciation and understanding vocabulary and demonstrated difficulty with reading fluency and comprehension. These are the same deficiencies that I see in my current school every day. These are the same deficiencies that I see in my current school every day, and the deficiencies that so many hardworking teachers and principals are grappling with in their respective schools across the country. The truth is, the literacy development of children in urban communities is dismal in general and at best static. After a myriad of local and national efforts, decade after decade, to get children reading on grade level, reading achievement has remained essentially flat. Now, I want to say this. Some years back, Jonathan Kozol wrote something called Why Children Can't Read. But he also wrote something called The Children of the Revolution. So, The Children of the Revolution is about how Fidel Castro in Cuba, whether you like it or not, got rid of the literacy program by teaching children to teach reading. So it was each one, teach one, and the children, solve the literacy problem. And so Jonathan Kozol concluded that the reason why we have a literacy problem in the United States is because we don't want to educate people to be literate. Now, Betsy DeVos, Secretary of Education, was on 60 Minutes yesterday. And she was answering questions about her push for school choice, which is designed to take funds from traditional public education, especially poor at-risk students living in marginalized communities. Ms. DeVos painted a bleak scenario where traditional public education will be replaced by voucher education that has been proven not to be any successful or more successful than what is already occurring in traditional schools. And these are least effective for needy students. She represents a future of education by those who envision education, innovation, technology platforms supplanting a reliance on curriculums promoting humanistic values and standards. They also envision replacing teachers with computers and online programs. Educators, no children, especially at-risk children, learn best in human environments and through human interactions. So I'm concluding. As educators and policymakers, we must push back against Betsy DeVos and the corporate academia innovation technology rush to turn our children into commodities for profit and requiring their parents to relinquish their protection under the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act in order for their children to qualify for school district and/or after-school remediation programs that allow corporations to collect and use data on our children to improve their product. To Mr. Pelzer's assessment and recommendation, I would emphasize education is a human endeavor in which we socialize our young to commit our moral, if we're religion, or our biological, if we're more scientific, imperative to preserve our humanity and thereby preserve the planet which nourishes us. In addition to earlier recommendations, and of course necessary funding to provide quality education for all of our students, I add, we must move forward to ensure all students are reading on grade level by grade 4. We must also move forward to preserve our classrooms and our schools in which students learn to read and do math and science. Additionally, we must move forward to maintain the human interaction of education. Our teachers and our administrators who provide safe, nurturing learning environments in which students participate in learning to become human as well as literate.
Very important, thank you.
Okay, I'm finished.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
I just want to thank you for allowing me to give Carol Klimnick's testimony. It's very brief. It's one page.
Thank you.
She just had car issues. So I'm speaking on behalf of Carol. I am Lisa Haver.
On behalf of who again?
Carol Klimnick.
Yes.
I'm Lisa Haver. I'm the other co-founder of the Alliance for Philadelphia Public Schools. So I'm going to read her statement. I don't want to thank everybody else for what they said. And as I always do at this committee, I thank Chair Blackwell and Councilman O for being here. For the public speakers, we really appreciate it. Good afternoon to everyone. I'm Carol Klimnick, retired early childhood teacher. I'm speaking on behalf of Carol for the record. When I retired, I was teaching kindergarten and horrified at what I was expected to do. Instead of a play-oriented, hands-on discovery approach, my students were brutally forced into relentless assessments and forced sitting for too long. So I was supposed to follow highly scripted curricula. My blocks and easels were banished, as was project time, where children could choose what they wanted to do and play with others as they explored a rich environment. Please note that the Common Core ECE standards were not developed by any educators. Young children learn by playing. I have included links to articles and research documenting this fact. I hope that you can take time to read them as you develop early childhood standards for our students. Defending the Early Years is a national organization focused on developmentally appropriate early childhood practice. Their articles document why standards and standardized testing are inappropriate for young children. Fred Rogers stated that play is the work of children. In the short and long term, play benefits cognitive, social, emotional, and physical development. Children learn as they discuss problems, negotiate, analyze, make mistakes, experiment, collaborate, and cooperate with each other. Play provides an opportunity for teachers to observe critical thinking skills of their students. Play leads to creativity, capacity for problem solving, and love of learning. How does a child approach and solve problems? Children use many mathematical and scientific concepts as they negotiate their way. Building blocks provide multiple opportunities to foster beginning mathematical skills as children experiment with construction. It is up to teachers and administrators to provide them with a rich environment filled with many opportunities to explore. A literacy-rich environment filled with books, magazines, posters, signs, and recipes creates a desire to learn how to interpret and read. In my class, we always had an assortment of insects, hosted an annual embryology project, went on field trips to the local post office, to the art museum, discussed and wrote how everything we did worked. Young children need hands-on experience. This is how they learn. Look at kindergarten in Finland, where play guides everything. You have an article in front of you from The Atlantic about kindergarten in Finland, which Carol sent in previously. Outside play, inside areas such as housekeeping, ice cream store, hospital, all provide opportunities for children to learn and develop skills that they will use as they progress through life. I just want to reiterate what Ms. Blunt said. Human students need human teachers. There's a very dangerous trend now, and we as observers of the SRC just saw, just at the last meeting, $10 million more for online learning. That's in addition to the $10 million that was allotted about a year ago. And as we pointed out at that time, there is no research that shows that this is beneficial for children. Human children need human teachers, and as one of the previous speakers pointed out, Mr. Hardy, our kids come with issues. They're not just in school to learn, reading, writing, arithmetic, and cursive, with you on that one, but they're really there to learn how to interact with people. Computers will not do that for children. Human teachers, deans, principals, that's what it's going to take. So we want to be on record of saying this blended learning, online learning is not beneficial for any children, but I think especially for our children here in Philadelphia. Thank you again for allowing me to read Ms. Klimnick's statement.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think Barbara McDowell, I don't think she made it today, so I'm Allison. I don't know if it's my turn.
All right,
Yeah.
can't hear you, so say
Oh,
that.
Allison McDowell, sorry. I think Barbara was before me, but she's not here. May I just pass these copies to you?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, that'd be great. Super. Thank you very much. At the end, I'm going to speak a little bit about financialization of education through technology, and those are some supporting materials I think are really important. There are two individuals who made the first round of the school board who are connected with eConsult Solutions, and they've just hired on an advisor from Results for America who is very much involved in Pay for Success finance for pre-K and early literacy. So I think those are really important documents. And just to clarify, I think you had me down as a consultant. I'm actually a parent. I mean, I guess I can consult on parenting, but I have no professional private capacity as a consultant.
Thank you.
In 1976, my third grade class constructed a geodesic dome reading nook under the guidance of our teacher, Mrs. Nevius. And inside, with books and carpet squares and flashlights, a bunch of 8-year-olds found magic. Wilder Elementary had a librarian who could place the perfect book in the hands of each and every child. We anxiously waited for Mrs. Nevius to take out her bookmark to read the next chapter of The K, or Island of the Blue Dolphins, aloud to us. Those were formative experiences for me. And I am now the parent of a Philadelphia student, and I have witnessed a relentless campaign to steal this magic from our schools. And today I welcome the opportunity you have given to consider what humane education looks like and how we can best support it. We need to reduce class sizes, hire certified reading specialists, and make sure every school has a library, a functioning library with a certified librarian. Public libraries are great, but they should not replace school libraries. Shower children with books that are culturally relevant to them, and help build a teaching force for our city that reflects our student body. Choose teacher-led professional development over disruptive consultants who are often selling technological solutions. Give children time during their school day to think, to discuss, to reflect, to challenge, and to question. Many students today, including pre-K even, and kindergartners, are instead of this being logged onto software programs designed to harvest personal data. And rather than age-appropriate play-based learning, they are being put in front of screens. And we know that increased screen time leads to social isolation and creates angry, depressed children. Instead of developing healthy relationships through quality time with teachers and peers, they are having their education shaped by algorithms and computer code. We know there are racial issues with a lot of these algorithms. Our children may not have libraries, but they do have unique ID numbers that track their every move online in school. And children have no idea that their data is fed into predictive analytics systems and that their unpaid digital labor creates value for ed tech investors. As Eric Schmidt of Google's Alphabet once said, data is the new oil, and we're about to frack our children. There is no guarantee that our children's data will be protected from hacks or leaks. No one can be sure it won't be used to profile them in ways that will actually limit their future opportunities rather than open doors. The most powerful companies in the world right now are cloud-based computing companies and telecommunications companies that have an interest in pushing education online. And venture capital and philanthropies are helping facilitate this transformation through social impact investments. And in the name of evidence-based policy, there is now a bipartisan push to embrace so-called innovative finance schemes that use private money to fund social programs, including pre-K and early literacy. And this pay-for-success model requires a lot of data to prove that their programs so-called work. And not coincidentally, this is exactly what education software systems promise to deliver, is that data, children's personal data. So remember the housing market crash of 2008 when bundled mortgages were turned into vehicles for financial speculation. There are powerful global interests who want to do it again using debt associated with pre-K literacy program investments. This next big short could very well be our nation's education system. This is not just in Philadelphia, this is national. This time gambling not on homes but on children's lives. So no software system is going to, Philadelphia's youth must learn to be independent, creative, and courageous thinkers. I'm here today in my Year of Du Bois t-shirt. I'm a member of the Saturday Free School, so I am here in the spirit of Du Bois and social justice. We need courageous thinkers. We need people who will speak the truth. No software system is going to teach our children that. And when allocating resources for education, I implore you as a parent to invest in people first and books second. That's where the magic is. Approach big data with caution because it can be weaponized against children and the common good. And so these documents here, this is the second page shows the plan to securitize debt through asset-backed securities on social impact pre-K investments. And Ready Nation is behind this. They are having a global conference on pre-K education in New York in November. You have to request to register, and I've noted on this document, it says a children's advocate or other policy expert may attend only with a pre-approved team of at least 4 business people. The people who are attending speakers include the people from the World Bank, chemical companies, figure skaters, KPMG, many, many global entities. You can look it up on the website, but really no educators, and it's pretty clear that they're not interested in having those people in the room as they plot this out. So there's a lot of money involved in children's data. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'd like to call forward a panel of all my friends, Lawrence Jones, Richard Allen Charter, Sharif El Mekki, thank you, Mastery Charter School, or the Old Shoemaker, Principal, Jean-Marie Kouassi, Commission of African and Caribbean Immigrant Affairs, he's co-chair, Mohammed Kamara, Commission on African and Caribbean Affairs, also co-chair, and then there's a Tamika Anglin, constituent. And gentlemen from the commission, I know that you heard them speak earlier about the ELL as if African children are getting their share. All right, thank you very much. Good evening to you all, and thank you so very much.
How are you? Hi, thanks for having us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you for your patience. Who wants to start? Lawrence Jones?
Certainly.
This is one of the people I call too when I have issues, everybody, on charter schools and education in general.
Thank you so
From
much.
our Richard Allen Prep School, yes.
Chairwoman Blackwell, Councilman O, members of the committee, members of the public, and fellow panelists. Thank you very much for having me here. This conversation about early education, pre-K to third grade, is an important one. I want to first start off by saying that I have been in education for 24 years, and they have all been in middle school, which would initially say to you that I don't know that much about early education. However, we get the product, and those 24 years have actually taught me a lot, and I've seen a lot. And there's some things that I am very happy about, and there's a number of things that I am concerned about, and some things that, quite frankly, scare me to death. In 2002, No Child Left Behind came about. It was a time in public education where we had a focus on education unlike any before. The amount of resources, the amount of money, the amount of attention that has been placed on testing, assessments, test preparation, that has been spent on various programs and consultants has been staggering. And we have seen progress, and we have seen some steps, but the steps have not been large enough. And there are some areas where we've actually seen regressions. So when we take a look at it and we talk about what it means to be prepared by third grade, we have heard from every panel the importance. As a middle school educator, I'm used to getting students in either grade 5 or 6. I'm used to having to deal with what was done prior to them getting to our school. For example, when we look at literacy, there have been times when we have had students who have done very well, but we've also seen, as you can see by my written testimony, last year, 75% of our incoming 5th grade students were reading below grade level. 75%. Of that number, 48% were more than 2 years behind, most of them closer to 3 or more. So off the bat, you have students who are coming in at a deficit, and those students are most in need of supports and services. And it makes you beg the question, of course, why did they arrive that way? So I have some thoughts on that, but my concern is more so based in the dangers of how do we address those students. Now, the easiest way to do it is to say that as years go on, if early education improves, we're not going to have to deal with those students anymore, and I hope that is the case. But for right now, the child who is in 5th grade reading on a 2nd grade level is soon going to be the child who is in 9th grade reading on a 3rd grade level or a 4th grade level. And that's a child that is not going to successfully navigate high school. So we look at that, and schools are left with a problem. One of the problems that schools are left with is to ask the question, do I put the limited resources into those students that really need it the most? Understanding that if I put all of my resources into a 5th grade student who's reading on a 2nd grade level, if he or she does the Herculean task of gaining 2.5 years in 6 months, they're going to be at a 4.5 grade level. They're most likely not going to be proficient on their assessments. So for a school, those resources are not going to necessarily show. Now, they will get some consideration through growth and other standards, which thankfully some of the rewrites of the laws have addressed. But many schools have been made to forced to make those tough decisions, and it's not always based about what's best for the students who are in need. Another issue that has brought me concerns, and I think I have more of an answer for this one, is how are the students getting to us? And I've already said that literacy and mathematics and reading is a problem, but there's also something called behavioral literacy. If someone were to say at the start of No Child Left Behind that we would have students at large numbers who were reading this far behind grade level, we'd be shocked. But if someone were to also say that there were states passing laws where teachers would be enabled to be armed so they could protect themselves and others ostensibly against their students, we would either laugh or we'd start to cry. But that's where we are right now. And one of the issues I believe is that we are not dealing with the whole child. So when we talk about behavioral literacy, if we were to punish students who don't know how to read, you would think that was cruel and nonsensical. But every day we punish students who don't know how to behave. And oftentimes that's not an indictment on their home life. It's not always a home life indictment. If I want you to know how to transition into my classroom, I need to teach that. And our kids are learning different things every day. If I want you to have conflict without resorting to your hands or a weapon, that has to be taught. And we're not necessarily purposefully teaching that. So one of the things that we look at is, at our school, we started a program, and it's several programs. And we knew initially that there were going to be spikes. And we saw a huge influx in certain behaviors that we did not like, but we expected that. So we've been doing restorative practices. We've been doing youth court, one of the first schools to do that, peer mediation and conflict resolution. We also do mindfulness techniques, and we have been working with some teachers actually doing transcendental meditation that's voluntary for certain teachers. And we put all of these things together. We switched our resources. We pulled away some of our NTAs or security and replaced them with restorative coaches because we have to teach this. Now, after the first year, we saw a spike. After the second year, we saw a minimal decrease. This year, from September until now, we have a 77% decrease in acts of violence and fighting. We have over a 50% decrease in suspensions. And these are real numbers. This is not just you put the kid out for 2 days and don't call it a suspension. You call it I don't know the term they call it now, a stay-home timeout. So these are actual real numbers. So I propose that we look at why not having mandatory peer mediation conflict resolution training in certain grades? We mandate that we test in those grades. Do we mandate that we teach kids how to get along with one another? Why not mandate that these programs are in every school? Why not look at sensible ways to raise funding? And one thing I don't hear very often is, looking at the state corrections. There are more than 20 state prisons who are either at 100% or up to 105% of their capacity. I would love to see the day that we have a plan on reducing those state prisons by about 15 to 20% or more and taking those funds and putting them into education. And then we could argue about things like, do we make smaller class sizes or teach things like this? And then my final statement, as I know I've gone on, is we are also seeing that when we teach these things, we also have to make sure that there are social linkages as well. We do have students who come to us with issues, but schools every day address those students as human beings, and some of their issues are actually gifts. A student that has to learn and work through a mental health challenge or a behavioral challenge oftentimes becomes a student that's that much more empathetic. So I thank you for this opportunity. I thank you for listening. I hope that we can all take a moment and give a little bit more weight to how we use the soft skills to enhance things like literacy, mathematics, and overall academic performance. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. I wish we could talk more about all of those things. Thank you.
Just like my friend and colleague here, this is my 25th year working in Philadelphia schools, and my experience has spanned from 5th grade all the way through 12th. And some of what I've learned about pre-K to 3rd was from my time at the U.S. Department of Education as a Principal Ambassador Fellow. So I want to just again thank you, Dr. Blackwell, Councilwoman O, for having me, and particularly as a person who directly benefited from early childhood education that was led by members of the Black Panther Party and their kind of Head Start programming in West Philadelphia. I'm appreciative to be able to testify about this extremely important issue. We know that early education is a crucial component to improving the quality of life for both students as well as the citizens as a whole. And I congratulate City Council for working with Mayor Kinney and the school district to give far more students access to universal pre-K. As we know that economists say that the lifelong economic rate of return is 7 to 10% per year per every single dollar invested in early education programming. And we know that there's still much more work to do. So Dr. Height, Dr. Logan, and their team has already spoken about several of the things that, so I will scratch that, but just to reiterate, the idea of literacy, early intervention and screening. I was very pleased to hear them talking about teacher colleges and the wholly unprepared teacher that enters schools, not just high schools, but pre-K to 3rd grade. And absolutely, it is extremely complicated for half the student populations, and they just keep falling further behind as the years go across. So a couple of things that I think, if implemented, and this is from the research that I've seen, if it's done consistently and pervasively. And this is, again, a loose framework, but these are some of the key components if applied. One, successful, supportive, and seamless transitions during each year and between each year, all the way through third and even fourth grade. And we can do this by insisting on effective and aligned curriculum, instruction, and assessments, both within and across early childhood and early grades. Leaders should create expectations, incentives, and requirements for joint professional development. So decreasing the silos, so pre-K gets this training, first grade gets this training, kindergarten gets this training, but that some of this training is collaborative and across. So this joint professional development opportunities for both providers, teachers, principals, administrators across these community-based early education programs and care settings, as well as the elementary schools. And that should include data collection and reporting systems from early childhood should be integrated as well. So that's one, the transitions during and between years. Another one is day-to-day activities that demonstrate the importance of social-emotional learning. So this was spoken about a lot. And how to nurture and develop this through play and other activities. We should ensure that every adult that is working with our children, particularly the younger ones, values and has the training, the professional development, reflecting that imaginative play is a crucial part of an equitable program. Our children must have consistent access to both structured and unstructured opportunities to visualize, sketch to stretch, making with materials, and dramatizing. Implementation of a systematic approach to support our teachers of mobile children and to support children who are new to a school is also particularly important. Thirdly, strategies that ensure positive relationships exist between children and teachers, including mandatory and ongoing cultural context professional development. While, yes, we must also strive for low teacher-child ratios, we must also value the role of culture and community context. And by prioritizing and facilitating conversations that include discussions of race, class, culture, and anti-racist teaching, we can make significant impact on student learning outcomes. We ask that you formally work with the Fellowship Black Male Educators for Social Justice to support the recruitment of an increasingly diverse teaching force. Implementation of a research-based best practice that develops strong family and community engagement, such as including children's extended family members, engaging in summertime home visits, leading school-based play groups, encouraging parent-led workshops, and holding regular cultural celebrations. Fifth, a high-quality, diverse teaching force that hires teachers who are actually qualified to teach pre-K to third grade, helping to ensure a deeper understanding of not only where students are in pre-K, but where they have to be by third grade. We should support teachers and classroom assistants pursuing their degrees in child development and/or early childhood education. I would like to call your attention finally to a program that the Fellowship Black Male Educators for Social Justice needs your help in bringing to Philadelphia that can play a huge role in supporting our younger students. This program is called Leading Men Fellowship. It is currently in Washington, D.C., and is expanding to Kansas City, Oakland, Detroit, and elsewhere. This program trains high school graduates to serve in pre-K schools as literacy coaches. They attend professional development over the summer and throughout the year. They work as classroom assistants while they attend school to secure bachelor degrees. The Leading Men Fellowship Program was created to address two different problems. First, it increases the number of male educators of color in early education, which is almost nil currently. And secondly, it helps reduce the gap in language development for preschoolers from various backgrounds. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you very much. Let me thank Sandra Dungy-Glenn for coming and staying all day. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you both very much.
Madam Chair, if I
Yes,
could?
sir. Councilman Jones.
I just want to thank these guys. Whether it's El Mackey at Shoemaker Campus, some of the best interns I've ever had over the last 10 years. I've gotten from his school.
Thank you.
Whether it was when...
I knew him first.
Listen, you knew him best and first. I'm just thankful he's there. He produces a good product, meaning young people that when they come down City Hall, they represent their school well, and they have a sense of self-esteem, that they're not second-class students anywhere. And so that kind of imagery comes from the top, and I know it does. And so I'm appreciative. I was watching you on television. I said, no, I'm gonna come down. I was gonna come up and hug him, but I won't do that. I'll maintain proper decorum. But I just wanted on the record to thank you guys.
Thank you so
very
much.
much for
Thank
what
you,
you do.
Councilman, for all your support over the years. And obviously, Jannie Blackwell, our esteemed Councilwoman, knew me when I first became a teacher, so I'm very appreciative.
He looks just the same. He looks like he could get mixed up with one of the seniors, you know?
Well, I'm thankful for all of your leadership. And Councilman O actually went to the school that I first started teaching.
Really?
Turner Middle School, yeah. Wow.
That's nice.
What do you mean went to?
He attended.
Wait a minute, something's wrong with the timeline here. Now, you attended his school?
Well, not recently.
Okay, all right. All right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Jalmecki, and thank you, Lawrence
Thank you.
Jones.
Yeah. Dear Councilwoman, Councilman David Hall, Councilman Curtis, I would like to thank you again for the invitation. And my name is Jean-Marie Kouassi, and I am co-leader in education at the Mayor Commission on African and Caribbean Affairs, but I'm also the founder of PALM Solution, who stand for the African Global Initiative, dedicated to facilitate social, academic, and cultural immersion of immigrant students into the Philadelphia School District setting. For the last 10 years, I've been very involved in the education of our children, and the reason being that many of them come from Francophone countries. And as you know, in these cases, English is not the first language. And so when it comes down to the education, we have many more barriers that ones coming from Anglophone countries. On the international level, I was also privileged in May 2016 to be invited in Germany to help develop strategies and social policies to expand the concept of cultural diplomacy and immigrant acceptance in the German school institutions. That's when they started to accept most of the Syrian refugees. The reason why I felt like it was important to mention this is because, for one, I wanted to let you know how passionate I am about the problem of integration of our kids into the system, but also coming from different backgrounds, as I mentioned, I think there's something that I could contribute here by the suggestion that I will make at the end. Since children begin to know the differences and construct classification and evaluative categories very early, early childhood educators need to affirm and foster children's knowledge and pride in their cultural identities. Unfortunately, these facts are often seen as liability instead of assets, leading to incorrect assumption and close attitude toward these differences. In fall of 2017, I participated in meetings to revise the School District of Philadelphia language policy. The previous language policy was from 1991. The new policy, which is now policy number 138, requires the School District of Philadelphia to provide a culturally and linguistically appropriate planned instruction program for English learners, which build on students' home language, on students' home language and culture. The policy addresses not only identification and placement of students, but also programming, accountability, equity, and community engagement. However, the true test of any policy is not only its revision, but also its implementation. And so far, since it's been even passed by the SRC, we haven't seen any implementation of these new revised policies. Along with that problem of implementation, we are also forced to be faced with some of the issues that come with Title I and Title III distribution, the lack of tangible data for our children coming from the different African and Caribbean countries. There's no data whatsoever. Therefore, I'm kind of surprised and kind of concerned about how the school district get to even equally address the issues of the different students, since we have no data. Now, the question is, how do we solve then these issues? And this is where I would like to make the following suggestion. First, I do understand that dealing with foreign countries is not always easy to come up with solutions. And since we have so many of the African members here in Philadelphia, we're close to 16,000 in Philadelphia and vicinities. And we have within these 16,000 people such as myself that were blessed to do their studies here, and also have learned so much about the system within Philadelphia, and knowing how our system also works in our own countries. I think that we can be assets to help with finding best solutions to the problem that we have faced here with the education of our children. So the first one that I think we should be looking into is to create a multifaceted African and Caribbean partnership consortium. If we really want to target our kids, we have to be able to sit together and for us in a certain way get a chance to also educate the people that are concerned about our children and vice versa, for them to educate us on how to implement the different policies that they have. I think for me that makes sense. The second thing is the consortium that we will create will work in concert with Philadelphia Public Schools, where the presence of immigrants is noticeable, to facilitate the inclusion of the immigrant students, but infusing multicultural content into the entire curriculum school programs, and also strengthen the academic outcome of these institutions. Moreover, the consortium will also provide a platform for community partners in the greater Philadelphia region to collaboratively facilitate the flow of information addressing the needs of all immigrants as related to immigrant data, gathering, academic outcome, language, cultural immersion, and other related services. Furthermore, the consortium will also collaborate and coordinate with relevant departments at the school district to ensure that policy and programs meet the needs of immigrants in their early childhood development. The consortium can also and should also be involved in education of the teachers about the concept of diversity, building a classroom-based multicultural framework that will address practical application of multicultural education in the classroom. Member of the council, the new educational approach that I am proposing finds its essence and distinctiveness on one hand in its ability to anchor itself in the cultural sphere of the surrounding neighborhood, on the other hand, in its capacity to meaningfully address the needs of its students. I'm talking here about relevance and pragmatism. Our K-3 relevant educational system needs to find in its sociological environment and the organizational principle and method the human capacity, the subject content, the teaching, the learning strategies and means, the wisdom and knowledge and ethic required for its smooth implementation in the education of our children. The pragmatism part of it deals mostly with what as immigrant we can bring into the education of our children. We have so many of our peers that want to be involved, but unfortunately there is no room for us to work together with the school district. And I think that if we have a system that's officially known to represent the African and Caribbean group, that system or that group could work efficiently and effectively with the school district so that the accountability, but also the interconnectedness between these two groups will help with the outcome of the academic outcome of all the public schools, especially the ones that have most of the African immigrants. And so what I am proposing today really is about us understanding that the problem of the public school cannot be solved unless we are part of the equation. Because whether we want to admit it or not, diversity today is synonym of Philadelphia. And the multicultural system in which we are cannot go back. It will move forward. And so the earlier we are prepared to work together and understanding that there is a need to create a platform upon which the building and the strength of our kids will come, I don't believe that regardless of all the other things that we're trying to do, regardless of all the other asset that we're trying to bring in, I don't believe that the school district will be able to optimize its implementation when it comes down to strengthening its schools. And so as I'm concluding, my sincere and heartfelt hope is that my recommendation will be inspiring and supportive of the effort of those of you who have ability to make a difference. We may think that we are just a small group trying to push our agenda, but the truth of the matter is, as Margaret Mead said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean-Marie. Thank you. Brother Camara.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Again. I would like to thank the council to give us the opportunity to be part of this discussion.
Thank you.
My name is Mohamed Kamara. I'm one of the co-chair of the Mayor Commission on African Caribbean Immigrant Affairs, Committee on Education. The reason why we're here today, as Jean-Marie mentioned, is because in the commission we have received several complaints of Africans and Caribbean families about issues of equities, access to opportunities, and language barriers, mostly throughout the interactions with their local schools. Now, as we investigated those concerns, we came across a serious lack of data for those two populations. And it appears that there are a lot of data available for Hispanics, Caucasians, African American, and Asian students, but there's nothing disaggregated about Africans and Caribbean children. And most of the time, they're not identified as an independent entity. They are presumed to be African American directly, which in essence is not a problem, but it deprives them of a lot of resources. As we know, many of the children come from war zones, come from places where they haven't been in school for the longest time, so the issues are not really the same. And because they have different academic needs. As we looked at that, as I mentioned before, we couldn't find any specific data on this population. So it is very difficult to talk about implementing standards when you have no basis to basically see if the external validity of those standards can apply to the population that you really want to help. I sincerely think that we are facing a conundrum here. Without the data that is needed for that specific populations, it is impossible to move forward. So myself and Jean-Marie, we looked at the registration form of the schools that are concerned. We found out that there's not even a box to check, rather than white, black, Caucasians, Hispanic, black, or Hispanic non-black. So we would like to see, first of all, an aggressive collections of data that can basically include all the populations of Philadelphia, so we can work towards developing a framework in which all the children can be serviced in the appropriate way. How can you promote diversity within the school district of Philadelphia if you can't find any data on these children, or you can't find any data on how many educators were basically hired through these communities? There's none. Because when these people come to us, they ask us, they tell us that every time I go to the school district of Philadelphia, I cannot find anyone that is African or Caribbean. And I work for the school district of Philadelphia. I seldomly come across anyone in the school district of Philadelphia that is an educator that is that is a Caribbean or an African person. Very seldomly you do. And the leadership team, I haven't seen a single one. So there is serious need of diversity here, because we know that children learn best in an environment in which they can see themselves, when they see themselves represented. So we'd like to see some collection of the appropriate data so we can conduct a longitudinal studies about these populations, and how the school district of Philadelphia is assisting them. And also, I see Dr. I talking about evidence-based practices, which requires a meta-analysis of several researchers, but there's no data on this population. So how can we even pretend to work on evidence-based practices if we have not substantial research that shows that whatever practices that we're trying to implement actually work with this population? So I will refer to the recommendations that my colleague Jean-Marie has mentioned. That we need to substantially collect data. We need to find ways to work together to promote diversity. That's pretty much it. Thank you very much. I hope I didn't confuse you more than clarify.
It was good.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of clarifying questions. I think I understood the nature of your issue and also your request for data. But let me just clarify. Do we know how many members of the school district or student population are of African or Caribbean origin immigrants?
No, that's
we don't know.
That's pretty much what it is, because there's no box to check, so there's no data. We know they're there.
Yeah.
We know they're counted as African American, which is not a problem, but it is a problem when you try to get them services.
So when someone who is migrated to Philadelphia and goes into the school system, there is no form for any ethnic group that might be a foreigner when they check in? Do you happen to know, Councilman?
You know what, I don't know that answer, and I do think there is a way around this problem, but it might actually stem from anti-discrimination statutes around identifying ethnicity, citizenship, and other things. But I do think this very important point that we have students who have come from very traumatic backgrounds with language challenges, that there should be a way around that, because some of our students may check white, but they're actually coming from overseas with war-torn situations, and from Europe where there's been genocide issues and other things. So I think that is really a very important point I never actually thought about. But I think that's where it may come from.
So, Madam Chair, with your permission, I'm a commissioner on the Human Relations Commission at the state level, and I am familiar with the Education Department's requirement for second language accessibility. And what I'd like to do is connect you with that individual from the state level that monitors that throughout the Commonwealth, and be able to have these questions addressed by the school district.
We appreciate that. We've had these discussions, and when they see little brown children, they just assume the African American and they get checked. So they don't realize that they are not necessarily African American children, but African children, and there seems to be consideration for Hispanic and Asian kids, but not African. Just today, one of our PhD folks came up to me today, who's part of the commission, and Stan Straughter, I'm glad he's here. She came to us last year, and we thought we worked it out, and it's one of the main groups that we have in the city where that's supposed to deal with multiculturalism. And so they have a Latino there, they have an Asian, and they came to her as an African and said, we want you to help us find another Asian. They still did not want to consider African people. Now, many of you know, we talk about it more and more. We're trying to create African Town in Southwest. We have more Africans there than any place else in our city and suburbs. And but everybody deserves their respect. But to go to an African person, speak several languages, not from here, they know her, she's part of a program, part of their program, and say, find us an Asian person, you know. I mean, they could have asked Councilman O, they could have asked a lot of people, but they wanted her to do it because she's on the commission, but they wouldn't consider an African. So we have to, as leaders, we have to, and council people, we have to do something about this. And I will deal with this because this is a city agency.
I will forward that information to you.
Thank you,
Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Councilman O?
Thank you very much, Chairwoman. First of all, thank you for that. It was very enlightening and I think very important. I did want to clarify that I went to Turner Middle School, of which I believe Principal Sharif L. Mekki was an administrator, if not principal administrator.
Teacher and assistant principal.
Okay, I was long gone. He is not that old. On the other hand, I did want to ask, if I'm not mistaken, you went to school in Iran?
Yes, from middle school.
That is fascinating because you were in like West Philly, Southwest Philly, and then you went to high school. And how did that happen?
Yeah, so after, as you might know, both of my parents were in the Black Panther Party, and so after, all of the issues that occurred, part of what they wanted their children experience was outside of, being an expatriate and what does it mean to be outside of the country and what could the Black experience be elsewhere. And so they had friends in Iran, and so they invited us to stay with them, and it just ended up being a very long living situation. But I came back to go to Overbrook High School and graduated from there, the school on the hill. And yeah, so.
Fascinating. Certainly a very enriching experience.
Yeah, very colorful upbringing, definitely.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman.
Is there anyone else here who would like to testify? All right.
You guys have a card? Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you. Very important. Thank you all. Feel free to identify yourself and make your testimony. And I'll try to stop my phone. Is there anyone else? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tamika Anglin.
Oh,
And
yes,
I
I'm
wanted
sorry,
to-
they did give me your name, I apologize.
It isn't one thing, it's everything. According to your resolution, it says standardized tests are an effective way to show how the children are doing and what areas need to be focused on. However, there is research to say that standardized test scores more closely align to income level than it does academics. Philadelphia is a city of 26% poverty. In the resolution, it says 33% passed the test in reading and 19% passed in math. 33 and 19 add up to 52. Smack dab in the middle is Philadelphia's poverty percentage of 26%. Laura Marion has a poverty of 5.5%. And Donna Cooper cited a statistics that said 88% of Laura Marion's reading level is on grade level. There are far more problems in schools than is attributed to simply academics. Parents who are unemployed, underemployed, who have to leave the house before children are able to get ready and go to school. So you have parents leaving at 6:30 in the morning and children who don't have to leave for school until 8 o'clock. You leave single-digit children at home with middle-aged teenagers to get themselves ready and out the door for school on time. The district cited that they have a campaign to increase attendance. The one thing that they do not have is a campaign to address the things that hinder children from coming to school. Telling somebody how important school is not going to get them to come when the issues that hinder school attendance don't have anything to do with just coming to school. Parents understand the importance of getting to school. The problem is the things that impact their ability to get their children to school daily on time have more to do with circumstances outside of schools. Employment, unemployment, underemployment, things as simple as, was the laundry done over the weekend so that children have clean clothes to come to school? Is transportation an issue? Is my mother feeling well enough today to get me out of the school, or do I need to stay home and take care of her? There are too many issues, and because there are so many issues, we want to default to the simplest, what we think is the simplest solution, which is increased test scores. The school district spends more than 9 days on standardized tests, and that's actually taking the test. That does not include the lead-up of test prep in those days. There are 60 remaining classroom days, 9 or more of which will be dedicated to standardized testing, and every single day up until that point, there will be test prep. That's not education. Councilwoman, you asked, what is the difference between the achievement of your peers and what can council do? One of the things that I know was different when you were in school is there was no focus on standardized testing. There was no budget for standardized testing at the level that children are being prepped to take these tests that they're not succeeding at anyway. Why? Because you're focusing on taking the test as opposed to providing the education. The education, if the education comes and is resourced, then the test scores will follow if, as one of the other testifiers said, if the tests are focused in on the things that children are actually learning as opposed to what is the motivation of the people creating the test, because it doesn't benefit them to create a test that lots of students pass. What can council do? One of the things that I hope will happen as the city takes over governance of the school district by way of the school board is that you actually hold the district accountable for the things that they say they're doing, and not just by data, but by real, concrete, show me what you got evidence. Go into the schools, find out what's doing, and 3 to 8 year olds are not standard, so you cannot create a standard curriculum for a child who is 3 years old. What they do need is outside play, fresh air, similar things to the things that you all had when you were in school. They don't need to be sitting at a desk all day. They don't need to be on a computer screen all day. They need a whole lot of things that the district is not providing, libraries being one of them. Cursive had become a conversation, and it's not about the act of cursive, but it is about the things that are engaged in your brain when cursive happens. And too many of those types of things have been removed from the classroom to pave the way for more and more standardized testing. When you standardize the curriculum, it always comes with a standardized test, and we don't have any more money to invest on testing. We need to invest in the things that we know work for children, the same thing that worked to get you to where you are today.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you for your testimony. We have an announcement, Councilman Taubenberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I just want to recognize guests from Ireland, from County Mayo, led by their mayor, Mayor Richard Finn. We welcome you to our chambers, and my colleagues that are here, we have also 3 former mayors, including the first female mayor ever of County Mayo, and her name is Ann Kepi, and also former Mayor Jerry Cole and former Mayor Michael Holmes, and most important is the Deputy Chief of Finance, the Chief of Finance, Mr. Peter Dugan. So I want to just welcome them to Philadelphia and my colleagues that are here.
Let me say welcome, welcome. I remember when my late husband, late Congressman Lucian Blackwell, when he served in this body, he went several times. I've been twice. In fact, Franny Rafferty was a member of council, and he embarrassed him so much, he made him go. And one of the trips we took, you all remember, you all I guess have been around long enough to remember when they bragged about the tour of the Pope. Remember the Pope went?
Yep.
So we did that. That's one of our trips. We took that tour. But it's a lovely country. I did learn one thing from Ireland, and that is that they call it the Irish mist. That's just rain. They rain it on. I found that it rains a lot in Ireland.
Madam Chair, thank you very, very much for this
Welcome
opportunity.
to all of you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Councilman. Is there anyone else who would like to make a statement? Seeing none, thank you also, Evelyn Sample Oates, for being here all this time. We thank everyone who testified. Thank you to the committee, especially to David O. And we will recess this hearing subject to the call of the chair. And we thank everyone who participated. Thank you, Naya. I see that you're still here. And you all remember that statement I made. I'm not so sure I won when it came to the final analysis. Thank you. Hearing adjourned. Thank you.